You're just the caregiver. Those 4 words. Those 4 cutting, dismissive words that Catherine Hamilton spat at me across her father's mahogany desk still echo in my mind every single day. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in exactly 48 seconds, the lawyer sitting between us would read a clause in William Hartford's will that would change everything. My name is Margaret Rose Chen, and I'm 58 years old. For the last 7 years of my life, I was a live-in caregiver for one of Connecticut's wealthiest men. And no, this isn't one of those fairy tales where the rich old man and the hired help fall in love. This is something far more complicated, far more beautiful, and infinitely more shocking than that. Let me take you back to where it all started. It was October 2016. I remember because the World Series was on, the Cubs finally breaking their curse, and I was watching it alone in my cramped studio apartment in Bridgeport, eating microwaved lean cuisine and wondering how my life had come to this. I was 51 years old, recently divorced after 26 years of marriage, and my only child, my son Danny, had just moved to Seattle for a tech job at Amazon. The nest wasn't just empty. It felt demolished. I'd been a registered nurse for nearly 30 years, working in critical care at Bridgeport Hospital. But the 12-hour shifts, the constant standing, the emotional toll of watching people die, it was wearing me down. My knees ached. My back screamed. And my soul? Well, my soul felt like it had been wrung out like an old dish rag. That's when I saw the AD.IT was posted on one of those caregiver placement websites. Seeking experienced RN for live-in position. Private care for elderly gentlemen in Greenwich. Excellent compensation. Private quarters. Light duties. Greenwich. That word alone made me pause. Greenwich, Connecticut, where the hedge fund managers lived, where the old money summered, where mansions hid behind stone walls and electronic gates. I'd driven through there once, gawking at the estates like a tourist. The salary they listed made my hand freeze on the mouse. It was nearly double what I was making at the hospital, and I wouldn't have to pay rent or utilities. I could actually save money. Maybe even retire with some dignity before my body completely gave out. I applied without much hope. What would someone in Greenwich want with a Chinese-American nurse from Bridgeport whose idea of fine dining was the Olive Garden's never-ending pasta bowl? But they called me the very next day. The interview was conducted by a woman named Mrs. Patricia Winters, who identified herself as Mr. Hartford's estate manager. She had that crisp, efficient manner of old Connecticut families, the kind of woman who probably had monogrammed handkerchiefs and knew which fork to use at a 7-course dinner. Mr. Hartford is 82 years old, she explained over the phone. He suffered a stroke 2 years ago. Mild cognitive impairment, some mobility issues, but he's quite sharp most of the time. His children, here she paused, and I caught something in her voice, a slight tightening. His children thought it best he have full-time care. Does he need extensive medical intervention? I asked. No. Medication management, monitoring, companionship really. He gets lonely. His wife passed 5 years ago, and the house is, well, it's quite large. I was offered the position after a single in-person interview at the estate. I'll never forget driving through those gates for the first time. My 12-year-old Honda Civic sputtering up the pristine driveway. Past manicured lawns that looked like golf courses. Past gardens that probably cost more to maintain than my annual salary. The house, mansion, really, was a Georgian colonial that could have been on the cover of Architectural Digest. White pillars, black shutters, ivy creeping up the brick in that deliberately cultivated way that screamed old money. Mrs. Winters met me at the door. She was exactly as I'd imagined, 60-something, pearl earrings, sensible pumps, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Mr. Hartford is napping, she said, leading me through rooms filled with antiques and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. But I'll show you your quarters first. My quarters turned out to be a 3-room suite on the 2nd floor, bedroom, sitting room, and private bath. That was nicer than any place I'd ever lived. The furniture was probably from Ethan Allen, the linens were high thread count. And the bathroom had heated floors. Heated floors. You'll take your meals in the kitchen unless Mr. Hartford requests your company for dinner. Which he often does, Mrs. Winters explained. Rosalinda, she's the housekeeper, she's an excellent cook. The chef comes in 3 times a week for special meals. Chef. They had a chef. Mr. Hartford's children, Mrs. Winters continued. And again I heard that slight edge in her voice, come to visit periodically. Catherine lives in Manhattan and usually comes on weekends. Richard is in California, so we see him less frequently. You'll meet them eventually. Eventually came sooner than I expected, but first, I met William. He was sitting in a sunroom that overlooked the Long Island Sound. A blanket over his knees despite the fact that it was a warm October day. He was a tall man, you could tell even seated, with that patrician bearing that some people are born with and others spend fortunes trying to acquire. His hair was white and still thick, swept back from his forehead. His eyes were blue, piercing, and very much alert. "So you're the new warden," he said when Mrs. Winters brought me in. His voice was gruff but not unkind, with that old New England accent that you don't hear much anymore. "I prefer to think of myself as a companion who happens to have medical training," I replied. He studied me for a long moment. Then cracked a smile. "I like her, Patricia. She's got spine." And just like that, I was hired. Those first few weeks were an adjustment. I was used to the organized chaos of a hospital, the constant alarms and pages and crises. Here, time moved differently. The house was so quiet I could hear the antique clocks ticking in every room. There were 7 clocks, and none of them were synchronized, so the house chimed at odd intervals like a very slow, very expensive wind chime. William Hartford kept a precise schedule. Breakfast at 7:30, always oatmeal with fresh berries and a soft-boiled egg. Morning medications at 8. Then he'd spend an hour reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, front to back, muttering about politics and the state of the world. "Young people don't read anymore," he'd complain. "They get all their news from the Twitter." The Twitter? What kind of name is that for a news source? "It's just Twitter, not the Twitter," I'd correct him gently. "Whatever it is, it's ruining discourse." He had physical therapy twice a week, a perky young woman named Brianna who made him do exercises he hated. "In my day, men didn't do yoga," he'd grumble, but he did the exercises anyway. Afternoons were for business. Despite his age and his stroke, William Hartford still kept his hand in his companies. He'd made his fortune in manufacturing, something to do with aerospace components, and though he'd officially retired years ago, he still consulted. Men in expensive suits would arrive in expensive cars for meetings in his study. I learned to make myself scarce during these meetings. But I couldn't help noticing that William always seemed tired afterward. And sometimes troubled. It was in the evenings that we really got to know each other. Dinner was at 6:30 sharp. For the first week, I ate in my room, but on the 8th day, William sent Mrs. Winters to fetch me. "Mr. Hartford would like you to join him for dinner." "Is everything all right? Is he feeling well?" "He's fine. He's just lonely, I think." So I went. And that became our routine. Those dinners were where William Hartford came alive. He'd talk about his life, growing up during the Depression, serving in Korea. He never talked about the war itself, just being there. Building his business in the 50s and 60s when America was booming. "Everything seemed possible then," he'd say, his eyes getting distant. "If you worked hard, if you were smart, if you caught a few breaks, you could build something. Really build something." He asked about my life too, which surprised me. Most wealthy people I'd encountered, admittedly few, didn't really see service workers as fully human. We were functionaries, interchangeable, but William wanted to know everything. About my childhood in Queens, daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who ran a small restaurant. About putting myself through nursing school working double shifts as a home health aide. About my marriage to Tom, a contractor, and how we'd met at a hospital benefit dinner where he was installing new cabinets in the cafeteria. "What happened?" William asked one night. "With your marriage, if you don't mind my asking." I minded, but I also didn't. There was something about William that made you want to tell the truth. We grew apart, I said. Or maybe we were never that close to begin with. We were good at being parents together, good at running a household, good at the logistics of life. But once Danny left for college, we realized we didn't actually have much to say to each other. William nodded slowly. Eleanor and I, my wife, we were lucky. We liked each other. Really liked each other, I mean, not just loved. Do you know how rare that is? I did. I miss her every damn day, he said softly. 5 years, and I still turn to tell her something and she's not there. It was the most vulnerable I'd seen him, and I felt something shift between us. We weren't employer and employee in that moment. We were just two lonely people in a big house, both missing someone. Then Catherine came to visit. And I understood why Mrs. Winter's voice had tightened when she mentioned William's children. It was a Saturday in November. I was helping William with his morning medications when I heard a car door slam, followed by the clicking of high heels on marble. Father! Catherine Hartford swept into the breakfast room like a cold front moving through. She was probably in her early 50s, impeccably dressed in what I'd learned was her uniform, black designer everything. Enormous sunglasses pushed up on her expertly highlighted hair. A handbag that probably cost more than my first car. She stopped short when she saw me standing next to William's chair. And who is this? Catherine, this is Margaret Chen, my nurse. Margaret, my daughter Catherine. I prefer Maggie, I said. Extending my hand, she looked at my hand like I was offering her a dead fish. Then gave it the briefest possible shake. I wasn't told we'd hired new staff, she said. Not to me, but to her father. I don't need to run my staffing decisions by you, Catherine. Well, you should. After what happened with that last woman. Nothing happened with Doris. She retired because her husband got sick. Conveniently after she'd gotten you to loan her $10,000. William's face reddened. That was a loan, and it's none of your business. I quietly excused myself, but not before I caught Catherine's eyes following me out, cold and calculating. That night, I heard them arguing. My room was above William's study, and the old house carried sound through the radiator pipes. She's Chinese, Father. For Christ's sake, Catherine, she's American. Born in Queens. You know what I mean. These people, they're clever. They get close to vulnerable elderly people and then suddenly there are changes to wills, unexpected gifts. Margaret is here to help me, and that's the end of it. I'm just trying to protect you. From what? From having someone who actually talks to me like I'm a human being and not a checkbook. The arguing went on, but I'd heard enough. I understood now. Catherine wasn't concerned about her father's welfare. She was concerned about her inheritance. Over the following months, I'd meet Richard, the younger child. He was different from Catherine, softer, sadder somehow. He lived in San Diego and worked in real estate, though from what I could gather, worked was a generous term. He came to visit for Thanksgiving, and where Catherine was coldly suspicious, Richard was merely indifferent. I was furniture to him. Part of the house. That Thanksgiving was the first time I saw all the fault lines in the Hartford family on full display. We had the full spread. Rosalinda outdid herself with a turkey that probably weighed 25 pounds. Chestnut stuffing, 3 kinds of potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade cranberry sauce, and 4 different pies. It was the kind of Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving that magazines featured, except the family gathered around that perfectly set table could barely stand each other. Catherine spent the entire meal on her phone, texting and checking emails. I'm closing a deal, she snapped when William asked her to put it away. Some of us still work for a living. The implication being that Richard didn't, which made him flush and reach for his wine glass. How's the business going, Ricky? Catherine asked with false sweetness. It's Richard, and it's fine. Really? Because Dad mentioned you needed another loan. Catherine, that's enough, William said. What? I'm just asking about my baby brother's little business ventures. What is it this time? Flipping houses? Timeshares? Cryptocurrency? It's a legitimate real estate development. That's what you said about the last 3 failed ventures. I sat at the end of the table. Invisible, watching this family devour itself more efficiently than they were devouring the turkey. William's hands were shaking. I caught his eye and slightly shook my head. Don't engage. Not worth it. He took a breath and changed the subject to something neutral. Had they seen the new exhibit at the Met? But the damage was done. Dessert was eaten in near silence, and both children left before dark, claiming prior commitments after they'd gone. I found William in his study, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said. Families are complicated. That's a kind way of putting it. He poured himself a brandy against medical advice. But I'd learned to pick my battles. Do you know what the worst part is, Margaret? I gave them everything. The best schools, the best opportunities, trust funds, connections. And somehow I raised two people who can't stand each other and only come to see their dying father out of obligation. You're not dying. We're all dying, my dear. Some of us are just closer to the finish line. He took a sip of brandy. Catherine takes after her mother's side, the Cabots. All business, all strategy, no sentiment. Richard. He sighed. Richard is weak. I hate to say it, but it's true. He's my son and I love him, but he's weak. Can't finish anything he starts, always looking for the easy way. Maybe they're just not the people you hoped they'd be. Maybe I wasn't the father I should have been. He stared into his glass. I was building the business when they were young. Gone all the time. Eleanor did most of the raising. And when I was home, I was critical, demanding. I thought I was preparing them for the real world. Instead, I just made them resent me. It's not too late, it is, though. That's what old age teaches you. It really is too late for some things. The winter that year was brutal. We had 3 nor'easters in January alone, and the old house, for all its grandeur, was drafty. I spent my days making sure William stayed warm, monitoring his blood pressure, which rose every time Catherine called, and reading to him when his eyes got tired. That's when I discovered his real passion, not business. Not money, but literature. His study was lined with books. Floor to ceiling, first editions mostly. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Steinbeck, Faulkner. But also Margaret Atwood, Toni Morrison, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Kazuo Ishiguro. Eleanor was the reader, he told me. Got me into it. Before her, I thought books were frivolous. Can you imagine? I went to Yale and thought books were frivolous. She showed me that literature was just life, distilled and examined. We started reading together in the evenings. I'd read aloud while he listened, his eyes closed, sometimes interjecting with comments or memories the passages evoked. We read East of Eden that winter. It took us 6 weeks, reading an hour each night. Timshel, William said one night, referring to the Hebrew word that's central to the novel. Thou mayest. Not thou shalt, but thou mayest. We have a choice in what we become. Do you believe that? I asked. I want to. But sometimes I look at my children and think we're all just prisoners of our DNA, doomed to repeat our parents' mistakes. That's a pretty bleak worldview, says the woman who divorced after 26 years. He had me there. It was in February that things started to change. Small things at first. William would forget words mid-sentence. He'd tell me the same story twice in one day. He'd get confused about what year it was. It's the vascular dementia, Dr. Patterson, his neurologist, explained during a house call in March. The mini-strokes are causing progressive damage. It's going to get worse. How much worse? Dr. Patterson looked uncomfortable. It varies. Some patients plateau. Others decline rapidly. We'll need to monitor him closely. I didn't tell William what the doctor said. He knew anyway. You can't hide that kind of thing from a man who's lived 83 years. I'm losing my mind, he said one evening. We were in the sunroom, watching the sun set over the Sound. You're having some memory issues, don't sugarcoat it, Margaret. We're past that. My mother had Alzheimer's. I watched her disappear piece by piece until she didn't recognize anyone. She called me by my father's name for the last year of her life. You're not there yet. Yet. That's the operative word. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were clear and focused. I need to ask you something. Of course. When it gets bad, and it will get bad, I need you to promise me something. Don't let them put me in a home. Catherine will want to. She's already suggested it, for my own safety. But I want to die in this house. In my own bed. Can you promise me that? What he was asking wasn't simple. Late-stage dementia care is incredibly demanding, often requiring round-the-clock professional nursing home care, but I looked at this man who'd become my friend, who'd treated me with respect and kindness, who read Steinbeck with me and asked about my son and made me laugh with his grumpy commentary on cable news. And I said, I promise. He reached over and squeezed my hand. Thank you. That's when Catherine's campaign against me really began. She started showing up unannounced, always catching me in William's room, always making pointed comments. You're here again? Don't you ever take time off? My quarters are here, so technically I'm always here. How convenient for you. She'd go through the medicine cabinet, questioning every prescription. She'd interrogate Rosalinda about what William was eating, suggesting I was overfeeding or underfeeding him. She hired a private investigator to run a background check on me. Mrs. Winters told me about that in a moment of unusual candor. They won't find anything, I told her. I know, dear. But Catherine is determined. Determined to what? Mrs. Winters gave me a long look. To protect what she believes is hers. The real explosion came in May. I walked into William's study one afternoon to find him signing papers while Catherine stood over him, pointing to signature lines. What's going on? I asked. Nothing that concerns you, Catherine said without looking up. Father? I addressed William directly. What are you signing? He looked confused, lost. Catherine says it's just some paperwork. I stepped closer and saw the heading on the document, Power of Attorney. Stop, I said. William, don't sign anything else. Catherine's head snapped up. Excuse me? This is a family matter. He doesn't understand what he's signing. Look at him. William did look confused, his pen hovering over the paper. He's perfectly competent, is he? William, what are these papers for? There? Catherine said, exactly. He can't tell me what they're for, which means he shouldn't be signing them. Catherine's face went red. How dare you interfere? I'm not interfering. I'm protecting my patient. Your patient? Your patient? He's my father. Then act like his daughter and not like a vulture. The words were out before I could stop them. Catherine stared at me, shocked, then furious. You're fired. Pack your things and get out. You can't fire me. Watch me. I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing, Catherine. William's voice cut through the argument. It was weak, but it was firm. She stays. Father, this woman just insulted me. You were trying to get me to sign something I don't understand. Margaret's right. She stays. You go. Catherine looked like she'd been slapped. Fine. Fine. But we're not done with this conversation. I'm calling Richard, and we're calling Dr. Patterson, and we're going to have you properly evaluated. And then we'll see who stays and who goes. She stormed out, heels clicking violently on the marble. William slumped in his chair. I'm tired, Margaret. I know. Let's get you upstairs. That night, William had another stroke. A big one. I found him collapsed on his bathroom floor at 2 a.m. He was conscious but couldn't speak, couldn't move his right side. The ambulance came. The hospital. The ICU. The desperate calls to Catherine and Richard. For 3 days, we didn't know if he'd make it. I stayed at the hospital, sleeping in the ICU waiting room, despite the nurses telling me to go home. I couldn't. I'd promised him. Catherine arrived with her lawyer. Not to see her father, but to meet with hospital administration about his care directives. We think it's time to consider his quality of life, she told the doctor, with me standing right there. No extraordinary measures. He has a DNR, the doctor confirmed, checking the chart. And if he can't return to meaningful function, we don't want him languishing on machines. The doctor looked uncomfortable. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. William woke up on the fourth day. He couldn't talk well, the stroke had affected his speech, but his eyes tracked, and he squeezed my hand when I held it. "Hey there," I said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." "Gret. My name, garbled but recognizable. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Over the next 2 weeks, we learned the extent of the damage. The stroke had affected his speech and his right side. He'd need intensive physical and speech therapy. He might regain some function, or he might not. The question, Dr. Patterson said in a family meeting, is where he convalesces. He'll need skilled nursing care 24/7. A facility, Catherine said immediately. Somewhere with full-time medical staff. No. It came out garbled, but William's meaning was clear. "Father, you can't go home. You need professional care, profess." He pointed at me. "I can handle it," I said. "We can hire additional nursing staff for overnight shifts. I can manage his care during the day." "This is insane," Catherine said. "You're not qualified. I have 30 years of critical care experience." "I'm more than qualified." The doctor looked between us. "If Miss Chin is willing, and if Mr. Hartford is clear about his wishes, then legally, this is about money," Catherine interrupted, turning on me. "You've gotten your hooks into him, and now you're isolating him so you can, Catherine." Even Richard, quiet Richard who'd been sitting silently through this whole meeting, spoke up. "That's enough. Dad wants to go home. Let him go home." Catherine looked at her brother with betrayal. "You're going to side with her?" "I'm siding with Dad." And so William came home. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. And also, strangely, some of the most meaningful. We hired 2 night nurses so I could sleep. We converted the sunroom into a ground floor bedroom so William wouldn't have to manage stairs. We brought in physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists. Slowly, painfully, William improved. His speech came back, not perfect, but functional. He could use a walker for short distances. He could feed himself, but the dementia was worse. He'd have good days where he was sharp and present. And bad days where he called me Eleanor, or thought he was back in Korea, or didn't know where he was. On the good days, we'd still read together. I switched to shorter works, short stories, poetry, essays. Things he could follow even when his attention wandered. On the bad days, I'd just sit with him, holding his hand. Keeping him safe. Catherine visited every 2 weeks. Like clockwork, always with her lawyer or her accountant. Always asking questions about expenses and medications and care plans. She never just sat with her father. Never just talked to him. Richard came once and broke down crying. "I'm sorry," he said to me. "I'm sorry you have to do this. I should be helping more." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." But he wasn't there. Not really. He flew back to California the next day and I didn't see him again for months. It was Mrs. Winters who became my ally. She'd been with the Hartford family for 30 years, and she'd loved Eleanor Hartford like a sister. Mrs. Hartford would have wanted this, she told me one night over tea in the kitchen. She'd have wanted William home, comfortable, surrounded by people who care about him. Not warehoused in some facility. "Catherine thinks I'm after his money." Catherine thinks everyone is after something. It's how she sees the world. Mrs. Winters added more sugar to her tea. She had a terrible sweet tooth. "You know Eleanor left me a bequest in her will? Not a fortune, but enough." Catherine contested it. Said I'd unduly influenced her mother. We fought in court for 2 years before I finally received what Eleanor wanted me to have. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about this family, dear. But you'll learn. It was October again, a full year since I'd started working for William, when everything changed. William had been having more bad days than good. Dr. Patterson had been frank. "He's declining. Probably has 6 months, maybe a year." I should have been prepared. I'd been a nurse long enough to recognize the signs. The increased confusion, the difficulty swallowing, the way he seemed to be slowly withdrawing from the world. But you're never really prepared, are you? It was on one of his good days, one of his last really good days, that William asked me to call his lawyer. Need. Talk to. Lawrence, he said. Lawrence McMahon, his attorney for 40 years. Are you sure? Catherine might, don't, care. Call. Lawrence McMahon arrived the next day. He was 80 himself, a silver-haired man who carried a battered leather briefcase and wore the same style of suit he'd probably worn since 1975. William, he said, clasping his old friend's hand. Good to see you. Need, change, Will. Lawrence glanced at me. Perhaps we should speak privately? No. She stays. So I stayed, sitting quietly in the corner while William, in his halting speech, explained what he wanted to change. I couldn't hear everything, they kept their voices low, but I heard enough. Catherine, nothing. Richard, trust. Can't touch, principle. William, are you sure? This is a dramatic change, sure. Only, one, cared. Lawrence looked at me then, really looked at me. And I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. I'll draw up the papers, he said quietly. After Lawrence left, William was exhausted. I helped him to bed, and as I was adjusting his pillows, he grabbed my wrist. Thank you, he said. For everything. For treating me human. You are human. A very good one. He smiled, that lopsided post-stroke smile, and fell asleep. 2 days later, Lawrence returned with the new will. William signed it with me and Mrs. Winters as witnesses. He was lucid, clear about his intentions. Lawrence asked him multiple questions, establishing competency on video. This will be contested, Lawrence warned. Let them, William said. The holidays came and went. Catherine and Richard came for Thanksgiving and Christmas, playing at being dutiful children while their father faded. I spent Christmas Eve reading A Christmas Carol to William. He loved Dickens. When I got to the Ghost of Christmas Past scene, he started crying. I was Scrooge, he said. Missed so much, working, building, empire. For what? You built something meaningful. You employed people, supported families, doesn't matter. Lost my family, anyway. I didn't have an answer for that. William Hartford died on February 14th. Valentine's Day. Fitting, I suppose, for a man who'd loved his wife so deeply. It was peaceful. He was having a bad day, didn't know where he was, kept calling for Eleanor. I'd given him his pain medication. The cancer had been diagnosed 3 weeks earlier, metastatic, inoperable, and he'd drifted off. Around sunset, his breathing changed. That distinct pattern nurses recognize, the death rattle, we call it clinically, though there's nothing rattling about it. It's just the sound of someone leaving. I called Catherine and Richard. You should come. It's time. Catherine was at a charity gala in Manhattan. I can't just leave, your father is dying. Now. How long does he have? Hours. Maybe less. I'll try to get there. She didn't make it. Richard was in California. He couldn't get a flight. So it was me and Mrs. Winters sitting with William Hartford when he took his last breath. Holding his hands, telling him it was okay to go. That Eleanor was waiting for him. He opened his eyes once at the very end, looked right at me, and smiled. Then he was gone. I closed his eyes and sat there for a long moment. This man who'd become so important to me. Who'd treated me with kindness and respect when his own children treated him like an ATM. He was a good man, Mrs. Winters said. Crying. He was. Catherine arrived 2 hours later, dressed in a designer gown and diamonds. Mascara slightly smudged from crying in the car. Is he? Yes. She stood in the doorway of his room, not entering, as if death was contagious. I should have been here, she said. Yes. You should have. Something in my tone made her look at me sharply. This isn't over, you know. There are going to be questions about his care, about his medications, about everything. I kept detailed records. I'm a nurse. That's what we do. We'll see. The funeral was held at the First Presbyterian Church in Greenwich, the same church where William and Eleanor had married 60 years earlier. The church was packed, old business associates, country club friends, society people who probably barely knew him but attended out of obligation. Catherine gave the eulogy. It was polished, practiced, and completely devoid of genuine emotion. She talked about William's business acumen, his philanthropy, his dedication to family. I wanted to stand up and scream that she didn't know him at all, that she'd barely visited, that she'd been more interested in his money than his well-being, but I sat silently in the back pew and let her perform. After the funeral, Lawrence McMahon approached me. The will reading is scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. at my office in Stamford. Do I need to be there? Yes. William specified your presence. Catherine overheard this. Why would she need to be there? She's just the help. Lawrence gave her a look that could have frozen the sound. She needs to be there because the deceased requested it. See you Tuesday, Margaret. The week between the funeral and the will reading was strange. I was technically still employed, they'd paid me through the end of the month, but I had no duties. William was gone. The house felt empty, echoing. I started packing my things, figuring I'd need to move out soon. Back to Bridgeport, back to finding another job. At 58, I'd need to work at least until 65. Maybe longer. Mrs. Winters found me wrapping picture frames in newspaper, photos Danny had sent me. Pictures of him and his fiancée Sarah in Seattle. You don't have to rush, she said. Take your time. Catherine will want me out. Catherine doesn't own this house. Not yet anyway. Mrs. Winters sat on my bed, looking tired. She'd aged 10 years in the week since William died. Margaret, did William ever talk to you about what would happen after? Not really. He just made me promise to keep him home. She nodded slowly. He was a private man in some ways. But he was also fair. More fair than his children ever gave him credit for. What do you mean? But she just shook her head. You'll see on Tuesday. Tuesday morning, I put on the nicest outfit I owned, a navy pantsuit from Talbot's that I'd bought for Danny's college graduation 5 years ago. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I'd lost weight over the past months. Stress and grief have a way of killing your appetite. My hair, which I'd been dyeing for years, had grown out, showing silver roots. I looked old. I felt older. The law offices of McMahon and Associates were in a historic building in downtown Stamford, all dark wood paneling and leather-bound law books. Lawrence McMahon's secretary, a woman named Judith who looked like she'd been born in 1950 and never updated her style since, led me to a conference room. Catherine was already there, dressed in black Chanel. Her lawyer beside her, a sharp-faced man named Derek Hutchinson who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. Richard sat on the other side of the table, looking uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit. He'd gained weight. Mrs. Winters arrived moments after me, and I was surprised to see Rosalinda, the housekeeper, and James, William's driver, file in as well. Why are the servants here? Catherine asked. Because Mr. Hartford requested their presence, Lawrence said calmly, taking his seat at the head of the table. Now, if we're all here, let's begin. He opened a leather folder and pulled out a document that must have been 50 pages long. The last will and testament of William Charles Hartford, executed on October 28, 2017, replacing all previous wills and codicils. October 28. 2 weeks after Lawrence had visited. 2 weeks after William had told him only one cared. Catherine sat forward slightly, her fingers drumming on the table. Derek Hutchinson had a legal pad ready, pen poised. Richard just looked miserable. Lawrence began reading. The first sections were standard, funeral arrangements, already carried out. The disposition of personal items, his watch to Richard, Eleanor's jewelry to Catherine, his books to Yale's library. Then he got to the financial bequests. To Mrs. Patricia Winters. For 30 years of faithful service and genuine friendship, I leave the sum of $500,000 and the Mercedes sedan currently in my garage. With my thanks and affection. Mrs. Winters gasped softly. Catherine's jaw tightened. To Rosalinda Martinez, I leave the sum of $100,000. In gratitude for years of care and the best tamales in Connecticut. Rosalinda burst into tears. To James Chen, I sat up. Chen, I leave the sum of $75,000 and the Lexus SUV, with my hope that he enjoys his retirement. James Chen, the driver. No relation to me, just coincidence of last names. He looked stunned. Catherine was doing math in her head. I could see her calculating. 775,000 given away. Out of an estate that was rumored to be worth. Well, I didn't know exactly. But a lot. To my son, Richard William Hartford, Lawrence continued. And Richard looked up hopefully. I leave the sum of $2 million in a trust, administered by Lawrence McMahon. With principal to be distributed in quarterly installments over 10 years. Richard, I love you, but I've watched you squander every opportunity I've given you. This structure is not punishment, it's protection. I hope you'll use this decade to find your purpose. Richard's face crumpled. Whether from hurt or relief or shame, I couldn't tell. $2 million? Catherine said. That's it? For his son? Let me finish, Lawrence said firmly. To my daughter, Catherine Eleanor Hartford. Catherine leaned forward. I leave the sum of $1 million. The silence in the room was deafening. $1 million? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. $1 million? That's impossible. The estate is worth, let me finish, Lawrence repeated. Catherine, you are brilliant, successful, and financially independent. You've made it clear throughout your life that you don't need my money, that you've built your own fortune through your intelligence and hard work. I'm proud of that. This bequest reflects my confidence in your continued success. Additionally, I leave you your mother's china collection and the Cabot family silverware. This is insane, Catherine said. He was incompetent when he wrote this. That woman, she pointed at me, she manipulated him, she influenced him. Mrs. Hamilton, please let me finish reading the will. You'll have opportunities to contest after. Catherine sat back. Trembling with rage, Lawrence cleared his throat and continued. The remainder of my estate, including my home and property at 47 Waterside Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut, all stocks, bonds, securities, and cash assets, I leave to Margaret Rose Chen. The world stopped as I heard the words. But they didn't make sense. They were sounds without meaning. What? I said. What? Catherine shrieked. That's impossible, Derek Hutchinson said. On what grounds? Lawrence held up his hand. If you'll allow me to read Mr. Hartford's statement, it might clarify his thinking. He pulled out another sheet of paper. And I recognized William's handwriting, shaky but legible. To my children, if you're listening to this, I want you to understand. I loved you both from the moment you were born. I wanted to give you the world, and perhaps I gave you too much too soon. You have both called me in the last 5 years only when you needed money, needed favors, needed me to solve your problems. When your mother died, neither of you stayed for more than 2 days. When I had my first stroke, Catherine, you were in Milan for Fashion Week and couldn't come home. Richard, you were in Vegas and didn't answer my calls for 3 days. Richard put his head in his hands. I don't tell you this to be cruel, but to be honest. In my final years, when I needed you most, you weren't there. But Margaret was. She treated me with dignity when I couldn't remember my own name. She read to me when I couldn't see. She held my hand when I was frightened. She kept her promise to let me die at home, in my own bed, surrounded by kindness. Lawrence's voice wavered slightly, but he continued. Margaret never asked me for a penny. Never suggested she deserved more, never hinted at expectations. She was simply good to me because she is a good person. In a life of business deals and strategic relationships, genuine human kindness became precious. She gave me that freely. My eyes were burning with tears. So yes, I'm leaving her the bulk of my estate, approximately $8.5 million after bequests and taxes. Catherine, you'll call this senile rambling. You'll say she manipulated me. But I want it on record, I am of sound mind. Lawrence has it on video. Dr. Patterson examined me the same day and certified my competency. This is what I want. To Margaret, you gave me dignity in my decline. You gave me friendship when I was lonely. You kept your promise. This house, this money, use it however you want. Travel. Retire. Give it all to charity if that feels right. But know that you earned every penny, not through manipulation, but through simple human decency. Thank you for reminding me, at the end, what really matters. I sign this with a clear mind and a grateful heart. William Charles Hartford. The silence after Lawrence finished reading was absolute, then Catherine exploded. This is fraud. Blatant fraud. She isolated him, she manipulated him, she probably drugged him. Mrs. Hamilton, don't Mrs. Hamilton me. I'm contesting this. We're contesting this immediately. Derek, file papers today. Catherine, you have every right to contest, Lawrence said calmly. But I should inform you that doing so will be expensive and very likely unsuccessful. We have video depositions of William explaining his wishes. We have psychiatric evaluations confirming his competency. We have testimony from Dr. Patterson, from myself, from Mrs. Winters, all of whom probably got paid off. I resent that, Mrs. Winters said quietly. I don't care what you resent. This woman, Catherine turned her fury on me, this nobody, this nurse, this scheming little gold digger, that's enough. Richard's voice cut through Catherine's tirade. He stood up, looking at his sister with something like disgust. Just stop. Richard, you can't possibly, Dad was right. About everything. Richard's voice broke. We didn't care about him. We cared about his money. And when we couldn't get it the easy way, when we actually had to be there for him, we weren't. Speak for yourself, I'm speaking for both of us. When did you last visit him? Really visit, not just show up with your lawyer and your accountants? When did you last just sit with him, talk to him, treat him like a father instead of a bank? Catherine's face was white with rage. How dare you, Richard pointed at me, she was there every single day. She read to him. She helped him to the bathroom when he couldn't make it alone. She fed him when he couldn't feed himself. She did what we should have done. She got paid for it. And she earned every penny. Richard turned to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we weren't better. I'm sorry you had to do what we should have done. And I'm genuinely glad, that Dad found someone who gave a damn. Then he walked out. Catherine stared after him, then turned back to Lawrence. We're not done. We will fight this. That's your prerogative, Lawrence said. Now, unless there are questions about the other provisions of the will, I'm not sitting here another second with that woman. Catherine grabbed her Birkin bag and stormed out. Derek Hutchinson scrambling after her. Then it was just me, Lawrence, Mrs. Winters, Rosalinda, and James in the conference room. Well, Lawrence said mildly. That went about as expected. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process. $8.5 million. A house in Greenwich. It was impossible. I can't accept this, I finally said. You don't have a choice, dear, Mrs. Winters said gently. William wanted you to have it. But Catherine will fight. It'll go to court, there'll be lawyers, investigations, let her fight, Lawrence said. The will is ironclad. I've been doing this for 50 years, and I've never written a more airtight document. William was very clear, very competent, and very determined. She can contest all she wants. She'll lose. This doesn't feel real. It's very real. You're a wealthy woman now, Margaret. He smiled. What are you going to do? I had no idea. The next 6 months were a blur of lawyers, depositions, investigations, and court filings. Catherine threw everything at the will. She claimed undue influence, lack of capacity, fraud, coercion. She hired forensic psychiatrists to review William's medical records. She had her lawyers depose me for 8 hours, asking questions like, how did you make him dependent on you? And, when did you first decide to target Mr. Hartford? Through it all, Lawrence McMahon was a rock. Every claim Catherine made, he demolished with evidence. Video depositions. Medical records. Testimony from Dr. Patterson, from the physical therapists, from everyone who'd seen William in his final years. Mr. Hartford was lonely, Dr. Patterson testified. His children rarely visited. Miss Chen provided companionship along with medical care. There's nothing inappropriate about a patient being grateful for genuine kindness. The breakthrough came when Lawrence subpoenaed Catherine's phone records and emails. They showed a pattern. She'd been in contact with other lawyers months before William's death, planning how to have him declared incompetent so she could take control of his assets. She was going to have him committed, Lawrence told me in his office. We have emails where she's researching memory care facilities, nice words for nursing homes. She wanted him locked away so she could get power of attorney. That's awful. It's also going to destroy her case. The judge is not going to look kindly on a daughter who planned to institutionalize her competent father for financial gain, then claims that same father wasn't competent to write a will. He was right. In August, 8 months after William's death, the judge ruled from the bench. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find that William Hartford was of sound mind and clear intention when he executed his will. The will is valid and shall be probated as written. Mrs. Hamilton's contest is denied. Catherine didn't show up for the ruling. She sent Derek Hutchinson, who accepted the decision with professional grace, though I saw him roll his eyes when he thought no one was looking. The estate was settled in September. One morning, I woke up in my rented apartment in Bridgeport. I'd refused to move back into the Greenwich house until everything was finalized, and checked my bank account to find $8,547,692.18.8 and $500,000. I stared at the number until the screen went dark. Then I called the one person I wanted to share this with. Danny? Are you sitting down? My son flew home that weekend. We sat in my tiny apartment, which I could now buy 100 times over, and I told him everything. Mom, he said when I finished. Mom, do you understand what this means? You never have to work again. You can travel, you can buy a house, I know what it means. I just don't know what to do with it. What do you want to do? It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. What did I want? I thought about William, about our evenings reading together, about the promise I'd made to give him dignity in his decline. I thought about all the elderly people I'd cared for over 30 years. And how many of them had been lonely, forgotten by their families, treated as burdens. I thought about Catherine's face when she'd said, "You're just the caregiver." I want to open a care facility, I said slowly. Not a nursing home. Something different. Small, intimate. Where people can live with dignity, where they're treated like individuals, not patients. Where their families are welcome but not required. Where someone reads to them, talks to them, treats them like the whole people they still are. Danny smiled. That's perfect, Mom. That's absolutely perfect. It took 2 years to make it happen. I kept the Greenwich house. It felt right somehow, keeping William's home alive. I renovated it extensively, turning it into a residential care home for 8 residents. I called it Hartford House. Mrs. Winters agreed to stay on as house manager. Rosalinda continued as head of household. We hired a staff of nurses, aides, and companions, all carefully vetted. All trained in what I called dignity-based care. We took our first residence in October 2019. Exactly 3 years after I'd first driven through those gates in my sputtering Honda. Our residents weren't all wealthy. We reserved half our spots for people who couldn't afford high-end care, subsidized by the other half who could. We had a former teacher, a jazz musician, a federal judge, a woman who'd worked at the DMV for 40 years. We had people with dementia, with Parkinson's, with cancer, with simply the frailty of old age, and we treated every single one of them like family. I still work there, though I don't have to. I've hired other nurses to do the heavy lifting, but I'm there every day, reading to residents, talking with families, making sure Hartford House lives up to William's legacy. Richard came to visit once, about a year after we opened. He'd gotten sober. The trust structure William had set up had forced him to face his problems, and he was working as a counselor at a rehab center in San Diego. He knew, Richard said, looking around the house. Dad knew that leaving me a lump sum would kill me. The trust made me get help. He loved you, I said simply. I know. I just wish I'd figured that out when he was alive. He paused. For what it's worth, I think this is exactly what he would have wanted you to do with his money. I hope so. Catherine never came. I heard through the Greenwich grapevine that she'd moved to London after the will contest failed. Apparently the humiliation of losing to the help was too much to bear in Connecticut society. I don't hate her. I pity her. She had a father who loved her, and she couldn't see it because she was too busy counting his money. On the anniversary of William's death, I always put fresh flowers on his grave, right next to Eleanor's in the Presbyterian cemetery. This year, the 4th anniversary, I brought peonies. Eleanor's favorite, according to Mrs. Winters. I hope I made you proud, I said to the gravestone. I hope this is what you wanted. The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe that was his answer. Danny got married last summer. Sarah, his fiancée from Seattle, is wonderful. She's a software engineer at Google, whip-smart and kind. They had the wedding at Hartford House, under the oak trees overlooking the Sound. Think Mr. Hartford would have approved? Danny asked as we danced at the reception. I think he would have loved it. I'm 63 now. I have gray hair that I no longer bother to dye, and crow's feet that come from smiling. I live in a carriage house on the Hartford House property, not the main house, which belongs to our residents, but a comfortable space that's all my own. I'm not rich anymore, not really. Most of William's money went into Hartford House, into the trust that keeps it running. But I'm comfortable. I'm purposeful. I'm content. Last week, a new family came to tour the facility. The daughter reminded me of a younger Catherine, designer clothes. Checking her phone constantly, asking sharp questions about costs and care ratios. Her mother, the potential resident, was quiet, diminished. Clearly uncomfortable being discussed like an object. I pulled the daughter aside. Can I give you some advice? She looked surprised but nodded. Your mother isn't a problem to be solved. She's a person who needs care, yes, but also dignity and love. If you put her here and never visit, if you treat her like a burden you've successfully offloaded, she'll know. They always know. The daughter's face hardened. I'm very busy, everyone's busy. But one day, you'll be where she is. And you'll hope that someone, somewhere, remembers that you're still human. That you still matter. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to watch her disappear. You do it with love. And if you can't be here every day, you find people who will treat her the way you'd want to be treated. That's all any of us can do. They chose Hartford House. The daughter comes every Sunday now. And I sometimes see her in the sunroom, reading to her mother. Just like I used to read to William. That's the thing about inheritance, it's not just money or property. It's legacy. It's the lessons we pass on, the kindness we model, the way we treat the most vulnerable among us. William Hartford left me $8.5 million, yes. But more than that, he left me a purpose. He showed me that dignity matters, that kindness matters, that how we treat people in their final years defines us more than any business deal or society connection ever could. Catherine was wrong about me. I wasn't just the caregiver. I was the person who saw her father as a human being. And in the end, that made all the difference. Sometimes, late at night, when Hartford House is quiet and our residents are sleeping peacefully in their rooms, I walk through the halls and remember William in every corner. The sunroom where we read Steinbeck. The study where he told me about Eleanor. The bedroom where he took his last breath. Thank you, I whisper to his memory. For trusting me. For seeing me. For teaching me that the most important thing we can give each other is our humanity. And in the silence of that big old house, filled now with people who are loved and cared for and treated with the dignity they deserve, I feel like he hears me. I feel like he knows, and I feel like, somehow, I kept my promise, not just the promise to let him die at home, though I did that, but the bigger promise. The unspoken one, to honor his memory by being the kind of person who makes the world a little bit kinder, a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more human. That's the real inheritance, and it's worth more than all the money in the world. At the end, if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone, only to prove them wrong? I'd love to hear your stories.